Previously on Kidney Plugged In.
Pat and Charlotte, I'm very pleased to welcome you to the show because you have a really interesting story.
I've been running a program called Yoga on the Beach in Parksville. We charge just enough to cover our costs, and it's become a major fundraiser. So a large portion of our income goes to donation for various organizations. And every year we pick a different one to support. My dad had had the third transplant at Vancouver General in the 60s. I thought, why don't I honor my dad and make that our charity? I contacted the Kidney Foundation. They got back to me and said, wow, this is cool. Your dad was involved in the early days. What a great story. And when I told my mom, she's like, well, I have a box full of information. She's been hauling around this file box for 60 years.
Good 60 years.
She opens up the box. It's full of documents from those days. Letters, newspaper clippings, notes that she'd made, diaries that she made about how she felt during those days. It was like a treasure trove. And so in April, after class, one of the people that had come, who happens to be my neighbor across the road, he comes over and he says, hey, my father was involved in the original kidney transplant team in Vancouver in the early days. And it's like, wow, that is cool. His father is Dr. Ralph Christensen. And he contacts his dad and says, hey, my neighbor, here's the story. He comes back and he says, well, myself and Dr. Maloney did your dad's transplant. And then I'm like, oh my goodness. What it took for the universe to pull us together. I could just see the universe going, oh, for heaven's sakes, we got you this close. Let us get you together.
And I was totally sort of mad. I don't know, just I haven't got a word for it.
Since we opened up that box, my mom has really gone down memory lane.
His name was Russell Lawrence Crowley, and he was kind of a good-looking guy. He was the floor manager at a hardware store. It probably started at the age of 17 when he was diagnosed with nephritis. Although they thought he was okay, it gradually came back. We were having a really good marriage. We had 3 wonderful children. He began to be not feeling well. They took him into the renal unit, which became a new word to me very quickly, awful word. I admit it, I used to cry a lot. He'd be at the hospital going through dialysis, and there I was in this big new bed all by myself. And there were a lot of feelings around that too. Of the 3 kids, the boy, Richard, in a way suffered the most. I went to put him to bed one night, and Russ was still on dialysis, and he said, does my daddy ever come home? I miss my daddy. And I broke into tears. You can't explain to a 4 or 5-year-old that maybe he's not coming home. A few years before the transplant, I just didn't know how I was going to keep on going.
So in total, how many years was Russell on dialysis?
65
to 69, 4 years. At that time, there were no living donors. It always had to be someone who had passed away. The match had to be made, permission had to be given, and the kidney had to last until it got to the recipient. It was a pretty tight time frame. They had
2 different times for the same operation. It wasn't suitable by the time it got to him.
I know my dad waited for 1 and 2, and then finally the 3rd one worked.
He was having it, and they assured me that it would work. I was happy and glad and relieved. He freely was happy, and now I can get on with life. I know that Russ tried to be a help to others, even when he was sick. He was always there for someone. If they needed something or if they needed something he could provide, he would, and he would try. I think his attitude kept him going until he'd had the transplant, and that was his goal.